pillows, the more I'll lounge. You make eye contact. Potentially just take like a little anything happen.
Why do you think the alchemy of culture right now is elevating women's sports?
I think it always goes back to the product that we are selling and that we're celebrating, and that is what's happening on the court. The play on the court at the WNBA level has never been better. Last season, we saw more triple doubles than ever before. We saw more 40-point games by individual scorers, and this season is going to be nothing less. Right now, we are averaging 1.2 million in average viewership for our live broadcasts, which is up close to 300% year over year. But ultimately, we are putting together an amazing product partnered with media companies that allow us to widen the aperture and reach more people than ever before. And this all comes down to one thing, and it's the athletes. The athletes of the WNBA are amazing women. There's 144 of them who have such presence on the court, who bring athletic excellence, but also this cultural relevancy that brands want to tap into because they understand the authentic power of WNBA players.
Why do you think culture is ready now to accept the brilliance of these amazing athletes? Because it's not that these athletes only just stumbled into our lives. What's happening now?
I think marketers are preparing themselves for the future right now. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation around the quartet around women's sports. In preparing marketers for what is now women's sports, some of them really aren't that prepared. So they have to be really prepared for the culture. And what I mean by that is a lot of the sports marketing and creative has been centered around the male physique, the male mindset, so on and so forth. So there has been advertisers who have vested in women's sports over the last few years that really haven't had good creative and communication messages tied to them. ESPN is doing a lot of storytelling around everything, like the most successful NCAA women's college basketball tournament in history. You don't know enough about these athletes. So that is like the sort of like the intersectionality of culture and sports, and particularly women's sports.
And that's where we sit at the WNBA, right? We always say we sit at this intersection of culture and lifestyle and sport. And through those lenses, so many brands can come in, but it has to be authentic and intentional. And it's not a copy paste from what you're doing on the men's side, because this is something that's completely different.
How about as a CMO, like how do you evaluate? Because I spent a lot of time with CMOs, and so I know how exciting it could be to say, okay, well, here's a thing that's happening. We need to have a voice. We need to jump in. How do you evaluate that opportunity and decide where it makes sense to engage in the conversation and how to engage in the conversation?
Talk about the WNBA, right? I think when things are authentic and when the things are not forced, they often work best. And when we saw the players in, for example, 2020, taking a stand, I think that in some ways allowed, companies and brands to see the individuals and what they stand for, rather than just the WNBA or the Women's Soccer League or any of the leagues. I think ultimately the increase in getting to know the athletes themselves, their personal life, their love of the sport, yes, but also their love of other things, music, culture. When we see sort of that whole person, it allows us to connect more. And I think just everybody finding their voice and their power. Certainly this has been increasing over the last few years, and whereas women's sports has, in some ways it has historically been objectified, and it's like we're playing for somebody else's watching and all these things. Now it's like, no, we're playing this game. We're committed to this business. We're sort of growing the love of the sport, and then also allowing others to make money because we are so good at this business of sport.
And I think we're at this pivotal moment where it's kind of an awakening, right? People, you've been in the game for a long time, but if you think about just making money, right? We're at the seed round, right? If people are getting in, there is a lot of just upside growth that in women's sports that isn't necessarily there in the same way in the men's sporting community. And so if you get in now and you really are engaging with these athletes and these teams in an authentic way, the opportunity is just we're just scratching the surface.
What are the things we need to do as an industry such that it does become a movement and an evergreen confluence of these things versus other things that we've seen that were more of a moment?
If I can add, we look at reputation as the most important asset for our brand.
Right.
And if you look at the data, there are few opportunities that drive reputation as high as partnering with women athletes in women's sports. They're seen as more trusted and more authentic. So I believe it's much more than just a moment in time. But the big change, which has happened over it's been building for a long time, but I think it finally broke through, is women's sports was often seen as a critical CSR imperative, something good to do. Well, it's still something good to do, and it represents equality and a variety of other things. But it's now a business imperative. People understand that if you partner with women's sports, you're going to make money, that you're going to reach audiences that you otherwise would not reach, that it has impact, as we said, on not just on sport, but on fashion and culture. So if you're looking to enhance your most important asset, which is your reputation, there is little better than women's sports, both a reputation and, frankly, to build and enhance your brand.
I couldn't agree more. It's a conversation we've had at Adobe about when we try to partner with different organizations, looking for organizations that feel reflective and different representatives of those organizations, so the athletes themselves that feel representative of our culture and our values. And women's sports is just one that there's so much goodness, and it just seems to really align.